Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to test your seam allowance so you're getting an accurate 1/4 inch seam every time.
Seam allowance accuracy is generally very important for every quilt you do, but it becomes especially important if you are piecing a quilt top that has a lot of small pieces or a lot of seams, because if you have a really small inaccuracy with your seam allowance compounded times 100, 200 seams that you're piecing, that small inaccuracy is going to add up quickly, and you're going to see that in your finished blocks. A really important first step when it comes to piecing your happy camper quilt top is to test your seam allowance. Now, to do that, all you're going to do is start with, I would say, 3 or 4 strips of fabric. The ones I have here, I'm going to do 2.5 inch strips of fabric, 4 of them pieced together. I'm going to use what I believe to be an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to go back and press those seams, and then when I go back to measure this finished unit, it should measure 8.5 inches if my seam allowance is accurate. If my finished strip unit is too long or too short, then that's going to clue me in on whether or not my seam allowance is also too small or too big. So let's go ahead and sew these together, get them pressed, and then we'll come back and measure it, and we can see how accurate our seam is. So I'm going to go ahead and piece these first 2 strips together, and I'm using my piecing foot from Bernina. It's a number 37 foot. And when I am lining up my fabrics, I tend to use a couple different markers. Because this is a 1/4 inch piecing foot, I can line it up with the edge of the foot. I also have a 1/4 inch mark right here, here, as well as right here. So I like to just follow those as closely as I can when I'm piecing. And that's just the marks that I use on my machine. If you don't have any marks like this, something you can do is actually measure out with one of your rulers and put down some washi tape or some 1/4 inch seam allowance tape, and it just gives you a nice guide to follow. So let's get this sewed up and we'll get this seam allowance done.
And just a quick note on pressing. Technically, pressing your seams open is going to lead to a more accurate seam allowance. For this video, I especially wanted to be as accurate as possible, so I pressed them all open. But obviously, this is going to really depend on your pattern and the technique that you're using to piece your quilt top.
Okay, let's see how we did. So here are the 4 2.5 strip pieces that we pieced together using what I thought was an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now if we measure this, it should measure, like I said, at 8.5 inches, and we're almost right on the dot here. And then you can also check where your seams are landing. So this should be 2.25 inches, this should be 2 inches, 2 inches, and then another 2.25 inches. So that is pretty darn accurate, and I'm really happy with that. Like I said, if this was measuring longer than 8.5 inches, then I know that my seam is too scant. If this is measuring less than 8.5 inches, then I know the seam allowance that I'm using is too big. So that's going to help you make the proper adjustments, and you can create some marks on your sewing machine to just help guide your fabric as most accurately as possible while you're sewing. So I hope that helps with your seam allowance testing. Like I said, it's so important, especially when you're piecing a quilt like this that has a lot of strips. A small inaccuracy in your seam allowance can really add up quickly, so it's important to make sure that you are piecing with an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, there you go.